My name is Samantha, and I'm 32 years old. Growing up in our middle-class Connecticut home, I never imagined I'd lose both my parents in a single tragic car accident, let alone face the ultimate betrayal from my own sister. When our parents were revealed a shocking $12 million inheritance, something changed in Hannah. The sister I once built blanket forts with transformed before my eyes, her familiar face hardening with greed as she demanded everything that our parents had left behind. I had no idea that her victory would be so short-lived, or that karma would strike with such perfect timing. If you're watching this now, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from and hit that subscribe button to hear how justice was finally served when my sister's perfect plan fell spectacularly apart. When I think back to our childhood, the memories that surface first are of Hannah and me racing through the sprinklers in our backyard, our laughter mingling with the summer air. I was 7 and she was 9, our sisterly bond seemingly unbreakable. Our father Thomas worked as an engineer at a local medical equipment company, often bringing home prototypes and interesting gadgets for us to marvel at. Our mother Grace taught literature at the local high school, her passion for books filling our modest 4-bedroom colonial with overflowing bookshelves and the smell of well-worn paperbacks. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we never wanted for anything important. Dad was always tinkering in the garage, working on side projects even after long days at the office. Little did we know that one of those projects would change everything. When I was 15, Dad developed a breakthrough device that revolutionized non-invasive glucose monitoring for diabetics. His company saw the potential immediately and fast-tracked the development. Within 2 years, the device was patented and in production, with hospitals and clinics across the country placing orders. What started as a modest medical equipment supplier transformed into a healthcare technology leader, with Dad's invention as its flagship product. Despite the company's success and Dad's rising position, our parents remained remarkably down to earth. They stayed in the same house, drove sensible cars, and continued their careers. Mom would say, "Money changes addresses, not people," whenever Hannah would suggest moving to a bigger house or buying luxury cars. The only visible changes were a renovation to Dad's garage workspace and annual family vacations that became slightly more exotic. Hannah and I began to diverge in our teenage years. While I inherited our parents' pragmatism and service-oriented mindset, Hannah became increasingly focused on appearances and status. When she left for college at an expensive private university, the transformation accelerated. She joined the most exclusive sorority, befriended the daughters of wealthy executives, and began dating Wesley, an economics major with ambitions of Wall Street glory. By the time she graduated, the girl who once helped me rescue worms from the sidewalk after rainstorms was almost unrecognizable. Her calls home became less frequent, usually coinciding with requests for money for a new apartment in New York or designer work attire for her entry-level marketing position. Wesley and Hannah married in an extravagant ceremony that made our parents wince at the cost, though they paid for it without complaint. Meanwhile, I completed my education degree and began teaching special education at an elementary school near our hometown. Hannah made no attempt to hide her disappointment in my career choice. "All that potential wasted on finger painting with kids," she once commented at a family dinner, making our mother nearly choke on her wine. Wesley would often steer conversations toward investment opportunities, suggesting that our parents should put their money to work rather than keeping it in what he called underperforming traditional investments. Dad would listen politely before changing the subject. As Dad's company continued to grow, with expansions into international markets and additional patents, our parents' net worth increased substantially. Yet they remained private about their finances, even with us. Mom still clipped coupons and Dad still changed the oil in their cars himself. The last time we were all together was for their 35th wedding anniversary. Dad reserved a private room at their favorite Italian restaurant, nothing fancy but meaningful to them because they'd had their first date there. Hannah arrived an hour late, Wesley constantly checking his phone for market updates throughout dinner. When Dad proudly mentioned that I had been nominated for Teacher of the Year, Hannah rolled her eyes. "Congratulations on being the best at making minimum wage," she muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. Mom shot her a disapproving look, but the moment passed as Dad brought out their anniversary gifts. Mom had restored Dad's first drafting table, the one where he'd sketched his breakthrough invention. Dad gave Mom first edition of her favorite novel, purchased secretly through a rare book dealer. The genuine joy on their faces as they exchanged these thoughtful, non-monetary gifts seemed to irritate Hannah, who exchanged glances with Wesley. As we left the restaurant, Mom hugged me tightly and whispered, "Never lose sight of what truly matters, Sammy." 2 weeks later, on a rainy Tuesday evening, I received the call that changed everything. Mom and Dad had been driving home from a charity event when a semi-truck crossed the median on the highway. The impact was immediate and, according to the solemn-voiced police officer on the phone, they didn't suffer. I called Hannah immediately, my voice breaking as I shared the unthinkable news. For a brief moment, I heard my sister again, not the status-conscious woman she'd become, but the girl who had held my hand on the first day of kindergarten. We met at the hospital, falling into each other's arms in the sterile waiting room, our shared grief momentarily bridging the growing distance between us. As we identified our parents' belongings, the gold watch Dad always wore and Mom's well-worn leather planner, I thought perhaps this tragedy might bring us back together. I had no idea that within days, I would discover just how wrong I was. The days following our parents' deaths passed in a blur of arrangements and paperwork. I took charge of the funeral planning, coordinating with the church where our parents had been members for 30 years and selecting readings that reflected their values and spirit. Meanwhile, Hannah seemed oddly distracted, spending hours in Dad's home office, rifling through file cabinets and desk drawers. Our mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, noticed it too. "Your sister hasn't stopped looking at those financial documents since she arrived," she observed quietly as we prepared lunch for relatives who had come to pay respects. "Grief affects everyone differently," I replied, though a small knot of unease began to form in my stomach. The morning of the funeral, Hannah arrived in a brand new Lexus, the temporary tags still taped to the window. When Uncle Robert commented on the car, she mentioned something about needing reliability during this difficult time before quickly changing the subject. The service itself was beautiful and heartbreaking in equal measure. The church overflowed with colleagues, students, neighbors, and friends whose lives had been touched by our parents. Dad's entire research team came, many sharing stories of his mentorship and integrity. Former students spoke tearfully about Mom's influence on their love of literature and learning. Through it all, I noticed Hannah checking her phone repeatedly, her attention seemingly elsewhere, despite the outpouring of love for our parents. During the final eulogy, delivered by Dad's longtime friend and business partner Martin, Hannah abruptly stood and slipped out of the church. "Important call," she whispered as she squeezed past me. She didn't return until the service had ended and people were already moving toward the cemetery for the burial. At the reception afterward, Martin pulled me aside, his kind face troubled. "Samantha, I don't want to add to your burden right now, but I thought you should know. Hannah contacted me about 3 weeks ago, before the accident, asking detailed questions about your father's stake in the company and his other investments." The information settled uneasily. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "Nothing specific. I suggested she speak directly with your father about any financial concerns." He patted my hand. "Your dad was a private man about money matters, even with me. But he was also very methodical. I'm sure his affairs are in perfect order." The next day, we met with our parents' attorney, Edward Montgomery, at his downtown office. The space exuded old-world professionalism, with dark wood paneling and leather-bound law books lining the walls. Montgomery had been our parents' attorney for decades, handling everything from their wills to the patents for Dad's inventions. He offered sincere condolences before explaining that he would walk us through our parents' estate. I expected to learn about the house, perhaps some retirement accounts and life insurance. Nothing prepared me for Montgomery's next words. "Your parents' estate is valued at approximately $12 million, he stated, adjusting his reading glasses. I gasped audibly, while Hannah's eyes widened, a visible shift in her demeanor as she straightened in her chair. "That's impossible," I stammered. "They lived so modestly." Montgomery nodded understanding. "Your father's inventions became increasingly valuable as the company expanded. Additionally, he made several shrewd early investments in healthcare technology startups that performed exceptionally well. Your parents were quite wealthy, but preferred to live according to their values rather than their means." As Montgomery continued outlining assets, I noticed Hannah taking detailed notes, occasionally underscoring figures with her pen. When the meeting concluded, she immediately began asking about the timeline for distribution and whether any assets were liquid. That evening, as we sorted through our parents' belongings at their house, the first real conflict erupted. Hannah declared she would be taking Mom's entire jewelry collection, including the diamond necklace Dad had given her for their 30th anniversary. "I should have it," Hannah insisted, already placing pieces into a velvet pouch she'd brought. "I actually appreciate fine things." Mom knew that. The comment stung. "These should be divided equally," I countered. "Mom would want us both to have meaningful pieces." Hannah scoffed. "You'll probably just put them in a drawer somewhere. What's the point of having nice things if they're not used and displayed properly?" Over the next few days, I noticed Hannah arriving with empty boxes, systematically packing up artwork, crystal, and silver. When I questioned certain items, she would snap that they would just go to waste with me. One afternoon, I overheard her on the phone with Wesley in the kitchen. "It's even better than we thought," she was saying in a hushed voice. "Montgomery says it's completely liquid within 60 days. Wesley arrived later that day, clipboard in hand, helping Hannah inventory furniture and valuables. As they whispered in the living room, I caught fragments of their conversation, including Wesley saying, "Once we get the full amount, we could finally pay off the..." before noticing me and abruptly changing the subject. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom, I stared at the ceiling wondering what had happened to the sister who once refused a new bicycle because she thought the money should go to a local animal shelter instead. Something had changed in Hannah, something beyond normal grief, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The formal reading of the will took place a week later in Montgomery's office. Hannah arrived with Wesley in tow, both dressed as if for a business meeting rather than a family matter. Montgomery carefully explained that our parents had left a straightforward will, with the estate to be divided equally between Hannah and me after specific charitable bequests to the local library and Dad's university alma mater. As Montgomery finished, I noticed Hannah's shoulders tense, her fingers tightening around her leather portfolio. "Is there a problem, Hannah?" Montgomery asked, noticing her reaction as well. "Actually, yes," she replied, her voice taking on an edge I recognized from childhood arguments. "I don't think a 50-50 split is fair or what our parents would have wanted if they had really thought it through." Montgomery looked surprised. "Your parents were quite clear about their wishes for equal distribution." Hannah leaned forward. "But circumstances change. Samantha has a stable job with a pension. She lives simply and doesn't have the financial obligations I do." Before I could respond, Hannah continued, "Wesley and I have a mortgage in Manhattan, significant investment opportunities that require capital, and..." She hesitated briefly. "We've accumulated some debt that this inheritance could resolve." "How much debt?" I asked, surprised by this revelation. Hannah exchanged glances with Wesley before answering. "About $300,000 in credit cards, plus our mortgage is underwater since the market shift." I was stunned. Despite Hannah's obvious taste for luxury, I had no idea they were in financial trouble. "Maybe you need financial counseling more than an unequal inheritance," I suggested. We could use some of the money to help you restructure your debt, but Wesley interrupted, his voice smooth as he shifted into what I recognized as his sales pitch tone. What Hannah means is that we have unique investment opportunities that could multiply this inheritance. It would be financially irresponsible not to capitalize on these market conditions. The conversation quickly deteriorated as Hannah began bringing up childhood incidents as evidence of parental favoritism. "Remember when Dad helped you buy your first car but made me work for mine?" she demanded. "Or how Mom paid for your teaching certification but questioned my marketing degree?" I was bewildered by her selective memory. "Dad helped with my car because I was working part-time at a non-profit. You were making twice my salary at your corporate internship. And Mom questioned your degree because you switched majors 4 times, not because she didn't support you." The meeting ended with nothing resolved, Montgomery suggesting we take some time to consider options. In an attempt at reconciliation, I suggested meeting for lunch the following day at the Riverside Cafe, a neutral location where we might discuss compromise. When Hannah arrived, she wasn't alone. A sharp-featured woman in an immaculate suit accompanied her, introducing herself as Stephanie Green, Hannah's attorney. "You brought a lawyer to lunch?" I asked incredulously. Hannah shrugged. "I need someone to protect my interests." What should have been a private family discussion quickly escalated into a quasi-legal negotiation, with Green suggesting that our parents had shown clear preference for Hannah in recent years. When I challenged this absurd claim, pointing out that our parents had visited me more frequently simply because I lived closer, Hannah's response left me speechless. "They visited you out of obligation," she snapped, loudly enough that nearby diners turned to look. With me, they actually enjoyed themselves. They were always disappointed in your life choices. The public scene ended with Hannah and her attorney departing abruptly, leaving me sitting alone with untouched salads and stares from curious onlookers. That evening, the text messages began. First accusations, "You always manipulated them with your goody two-shoes act." Then ultimatums, "Either agree to a 70-30 split or I'll contest the will and tie this up for years." Finally, thinly veiled threats, "I have evidence that Dad wasn't thinking clearly when he signed the latest will. Do you really want that made public?" The situation worsened when I began receiving calls from extended family members. Cousin Jennifer phoned in tears, asking why I was hiding family heirlooms that Hannah said belonged to everyone. Uncle Robert questioned whether I had influenced Dad's business decisions before his death. It became clear that Hannah was systematically contacting relatives, spinning narratives that cast me as manipulative and greedy. My best friend Alicia became my lifeline during this time, offering both emotional support and practical advice. My college roommate practices family law, she told me over coffee in my apartment. "This is textbook bullying behavior. Hannah's trying to wear you down." Through Alicia's contacts, I discovered something disturbing. Hannah had consulted with 3 different estate attorneys in the weeks before our parents' death. One of them, indiscreet after a few drinks at a bar association event, mentioned to Alicia's friend that Hannah had been inquiring about ways to challenge wills on grounds of mental incapacity nearly a month before the accident. The revelation left me physically ill. Had Hannah been planning this even while our parents were alive? My suspicions were confirmed when Wesley showed up unannounced at my apartment one evening. His usual slick demeanor was in full force as he explained he'd come to reason with me. "Hannah's very emotional right now," he explained, perching on my couch like he was conducting a business meeting. "Grief affects people differently. Is that why she's been calling family members with lies about me?" I asked. Wesley had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable. "Family disagreements get messy, but I'm here to talk solutions." His proposal was breathtaking in its audacity. I would relinquish my claim to the estate except for a generous $500,000, signing over the rest to Hannah. "This way, everyone gets what they need," he explained, as if he were offering me a favor. "You keep teaching and living simply. Hannah handles the larger amount, and no one deals with costly legal battles." When I refused, his friendly facade cracked slightly. "Hannah won't stop, you know. She'll fight this for years if necessary. Ask yourself if half the money is worth losing your peace of mind." As he left, his parting words chilled me. "Family should stick together, Samantha. Don't make Hannah choose between you and what she deserves." Alone in my apartment that night, I realized the sister I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone willing to destroy our relationship for money our parents had never even cared about displaying. 3 days after Wesley's visit, a courier delivered a thick envelope containing formal legal notice that Hannah was contesting our parents while on grounds of undue influence. The attached affidavit contained allegations so false and hurtful that I could barely finish reading. Hannah claimed that during our father's final months, I had systematically isolated him from her, manipulating him into maintaining the equal distribution in the will despite his clear desire to provide more generously for Hannah. The document painted me as calculating and manipulative, suggesting I had taken advantage of our mother's declining cognitive function to ensure my equal share of the estate. Every claim was fabricated, twisting innocent interactions into sinister manipulations. A dinner I had arranged for our parents' anniversary became an opportunity to prevent Hannah's access. My weekly phone calls to Mom transformed into monitoring and controlling communications. The legal assault continued when I learned Hannah had hired a private investigator to document my activities. Alicia spotted the same car parked near my apartment 3 days in a row and took down the license plate. Her law enforcement contact confirmed it belonged to a private investigation firm that specialized in surveillance for civil cases. The stress began affecting every aspect of my life. Sleep became elusive, interrupted by grinding teeth and anxiety dreams where I searched empty houses for my parents. Panic attacks ambushed me in grocery store aisles and during school meetings. The dual trauma of grief and betrayal left me feeling hollowed out, going through motions of daily life while emotionally unraveling. My principal noticed my deteriorating condition and gently suggested I take personal leave. "The children need you at your best," she said kindly. "Take time to heal." With reluctance, I accepted a month's leave, using the time to start therapy with Dr. Melanie Winters, a grief counselor who specialized in family conflict. "You're experiencing complicated grief," she explained during our second session. "The natural mourning process is being interrupted and intensified by this inheritance conflict. Your sister's actions are forcing you to defend yourself when you should be processing your loss." The one bright spot during this dark period was my friendship with James, a history teacher at my school. He began checking on me daily, bringing homemade soup and fresh bread, sitting quietly with me when words failed. His steady presence became an anchor when everything else seemed to be drifting away. My brother and I didn't speak for 5 years after our grandmother's estate, he shared one evening. "Money reveals who people really are." While gathering photo albums from my parents' house, I discovered something that confirmed my worst fears about how far Hannah would go. A small recording device carefully positioned behind books on the living room shelf. With trembling hands, I confronted Hannah by phone immediately. "You're bugging the house?" "Our parents' house," I demanded. Her response was chillingly matter-of-fact. "I need evidence you're hiding assets." My attorney recommended documentation. The final confrontation happened in our parents' kitchen, where family photos still hung on the refrigerator, including one of Hannah and me building a snowman, our young faces flushed with cold and happiness. I had come to collect my remaining belongings when Hannah arrived unexpectedly. "Montgomery called," she said without preamble. "He says you're being difficult about releasing funds while the will is contested." "The court froze the estate because you contested the will," I reminded her. "Of course funds can't be distributed." Hannah's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. "I need that money now, not after years of legal garbage." Wesley has investors waiting. When I suggested again that perhaps financial counseling would better address their problems, Hannah laughed bitterly. "You have no idea what real life costs." Your little teacher's salary and modest apartment. You play at being self-righteous while judging my lifestyle. I don't judge your lifestyle, I countered. I judge what you're willing to do to maintain it. The argument escalated until Hannah delivered her ultimatum, hands flat on the kitchen counter where we'd once baked Christmas cookies with Mom. Sign over everything except the $500,000 Wesley offered, or I swear I will drag this out until the lawyers take half of it anyway. Her eyes, so like our mother's in color, but nothing like hers in warmth, held mine. I've already spent against the expected inheritance. I need this, and I will not back down. Montgomery confirmed Hannah's threat was viable. She's prepared extensive documentation. Even though it's largely fabricated, disproving each claim will take time and considerable legal expense. This could easily take 2 to 3 years to resolve, with significant portions of the estate going to legal fees. That night, I sat in my parents' garden, where Dad had taught us constellation names and Mom had pressed flowers for bookmarks. The thought of their legacy being devoured by legal battles and sibling hatred was unbearable. The money had never been important to them. What they valued was family, integrity, their shared life of purpose and love. By morning, I had made my decision. I would walk away with the uncontested portion rather than fight a protracted legal battle that would destroy what remained of our family and drain the estate. I calculated that after the specific bequests and tax considerations, I could keep approximately $500,000 without Hannah's objection. It was far less than my rightful share, but it would allow me to preserve my mental health and honor our parents' memory in my own way. The signing meeting at Montgomery's office felt like surrendering to an emotional hostage situation. Hannah arrived with both Wesley and her attorney, all three dressed impeccably as if celebrating a business victory. Montgomery couldn't hide his disapproval as he presented the documents that would relinquish my claim to most of the estate. "Are you certain about this, Samantha?" he asked quietly. "The evidence Hannah has presented is questionable at best. With time, we could challenge these claims effectively." I nodded, avoiding Hannah's gaze. "I'm certain. I want this finished." As I signed my name to the documents, Hannah's face revealed a cold smirk I'd never seen before. "Perfect," she said, examining the signature. "I knew you'd see reason eventually." What hurt more than losing the inheritance was Hannah's refusal to even discuss the sentimental items. When I asked about splitting family photo albums and holiday ornaments our mother had collected for each of us, Hannah's response was swift and cutting. "The agreement covers all assets. If you wanted keepsakes, you should have negotiated that separately." Wesley reviewed the paperwork with calculating eyes, occasionally whispering clarifications to Hannah. Not once did he acknowledge the family relationship being destroyed before him, treating the situation as purely transactional. As they prepared to leave, Hannah paused at the door. "I think it's best if we take some time apart," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "For healing." The words were right, but the tone was wrong, like an actress reciting lines without understanding their meaning. "How much time?" I asked. She shrugged. "I'll be busy with some major projects. I'll reach out when things settle." We both knew she had no intention of reaching out. The following weekend, I emptied my childhood bedroom while Hannah was away on what Wesley described as a well-deserved vacation following the settlement. Every book, stuffed animal, and school certificate felt weighted with memories that Hannah had deemed worthless compared to their monetary counterparts. Alicia and James helped me move from my comfortable condo to a smaller apartment across town. The downsize was necessary after taking unpaid leave from teaching, though the settlement would keep me financially secure. "She may have gotten the money, but you kept your integrity," Alicia said as we unpacked kitchen boxes. "That's worth more than $12 million. Rather than letting the settlement money sit in bitterness, I decided to honor my parents in a way they would have appreciated. I established a memorial scholarship at the high school where Mom had taught, designating $200,000 to help disadvantaged students pursue teaching careers. The local paper ran a small article about the scholarship, quoting me about our parents' commitment to education and community service. I carefully avoided any mention of the inheritance dispute. Hannah's social media accounts began filling with evidence of her windfall. Photos of a sprawling new house in an exclusive suburb, her wrist draped with a watch I recognized as costing more than my annual teaching salary. Wesley standing proudly beside a Tesla with a personalized license plate. Most surprising was a local business magazine interview where Hannah described herself as an entrepreneur and angel investor launching a luxury hospitality concept. The article mentioned her recently acquired capital without specifying its source, creating the impression of self-made success. While Hannah documented her spending spree, I focused on rebuilding my life. I returned to teaching, finding solace in my students' uncomplicated needs and genuine affection. I volunteered at the grief support group Dr. Winters had recommended, eventually helping facilitate sessions for others experiencing family estrangement. And my friendship with James gradually deepened into something more, his quiet strength and authentic nature a stark contrast to the materialistic values that had consumed my sister. A chance encounter with Martin, my father's business partner, provided the first hint that all might not be well in Hannah's new empire. We met at a charity auction benefiting the hospital where Dad's devices were first used. "I'm concerned about some of Hannah's business decisions," he confided as we examined the silent auction items. She approached me about investing in Wesley's new hedge fund. The projected returns are suspiciously high, and when I asked for documentation, Wesley became evasive. Martin shook his head. "Your father was methodical, researching investments for months before committing funds. Hannah seems to be making impulsive decisions with large sums." His words were prophetic. Within weeks, rumors began circulating in financial circles about Wesley's investment strategies. A former colleague of Hannah's mentioned at a teacher's happy hour that several clients had withdrawn from Wesley's firm after questioning his methods. More troubling was the call from Aunt Patricia. "Hannah is selling your parents' house," she said, her voice tight with disapproval. "The realtor is hosting an estate sale next weekend. If there are any personal items you want to save, this might be your last chance." I couldn't bear to attend the estate sale, sending James instead to rescue any remaining family photos or mementos. He returned with a small box, his expression grim. "Most personal items were already gone," he reported. "But the housekeeper, Mrs. Rivera, had saved some photos and your mother's recipe book. She asked me to give them to you." The handwritten recipe cards, stained with vanilla extract and butter fingerprints, brought tears I thought had been exhausted. A week later, an anonymous package arrived containing several photo albums and a note. "These shouldn't be sold to strangers. Your mother would want you to have them." I recognized Mrs. Rivera's handwriting, her small act of kindness a stark contrast to my sister's callousness. As Hannah surrounded herself with material acquisitions, I noticed a curious pattern in our extended family's behavior. The relatives who had initially believed Hannah's stories began reaching out to me again. Cousin Jennifer invited me to her daughter's ballet recital. Uncle Robert called to share memories of Dad. It seemed the extravagant lifestyle Hannah flaunted on social media was raising questions about her claims of my financial manipulation. "People aren't stupid," Alicia observed. "They can do math. If you supposedly swindled the inheritance, why are you teaching special ed while Hannah's buying vacation properties?" I maintained a dignified silence about the settlement, never contradicting Hannah's narrative, but focusing instead on honoring our parents through the scholarship and community involvement. The local education board recognized the memorial scholarship with a small ceremony, presenting me with a plaque that now hangs in my classroom next to a photo of Mom reading to her students. Through it all, I waited for the grief to soften, for the sense of betrayal to dull. Some days were better than others. On Mom's birthday, I placed flowers at their graves alone, Hannah having sent an impersonal arrangement delivered by a high-end florist. I wondered if she ever reflected on what our parents would think of her choices, or if the comfort of wealth had completely overshadowed such considerations. I had no way of knowing that answers to these questions would come sooner and more dramatically than I could have imagined. Exactly 2 months after the settlement was finalized, I was grading papers in my classroom after school when Alicia burst in, waving her phone. "You need to see this," she said, pulling up the financial section of the city newspaper on her screen. The headlines sent a jolt through me. Federal investigation launched into Wesley Davis Investment Group amid fraud allegations. I scanned the article with growing disbelief. Wesley's firm was under investigation for misleading investors and potentially operating a sophisticated Ponzi scheme. The article mentioned recently acquired family money used to attract additional investors with promises of exclusive opportunities and extraordinary returns. Before I could fully process this information, my phone rang. It was Martin. "Have you seen the news about Wesley?" he asked without preamble. "Hannah invested nearly $8 million with his fund," he continued, his voice heavy. I tried to warn her about diversification, but she said Wesley had insider connections that guaranteed returns. Over the next several days, the situation unraveled with stunning speed. Wesley had apparently fled the country, transferring significant assets to offshore accounts before the investigation became public. Hannah's luxury resort development, prominently featured in her social media posts, had collapsed after contractors walked off the job due to bounce checks, resulting in a $2 million loss. Most devastating was the tax audit revealing Hannah had failed to properly account for estate taxes, resulting in penalties exceeding $1.5 million. The schadenfreude I expected to feel never materialized. Instead, watching my sister's life implode from a distance felt hollow and sad, another layer of loss atop the grief I was still processing. Reports of Hannah's assets being seized began circulating among family. Aunt Patricia called to say Hannah's designer clothing and cars were being repossessed, the new house listed for quick sale at a significant loss. Through it all, I maintained my distance, focusing on the approaching school year and the memorial scholarship recipients who would be announced at the fall assembly. Then the text messages started, a mirror image of those I'd received during the inheritance dispute. First came vague check-ins, "Hey, how have you been?" Then thinly veiled hints, "Things have been challenging lately." Finally, direct appeals, "Can we talk? I need some advice about financial matters." I left them unanswered, the wound still too fresh to risk reopening. Aunt Patricia provided updates whether I wanted them or not. "Hannah's been calling everyone asking for loans," she reported during our monthly lunch. She told Uncle Robert she just needs to bridge some temporary cash flow issues until Wesley resolves his misunderstanding with the government. The idea that Hannah still believed in Wesley's innocence was perhaps the most painful revelation. The first voicemail arrived on what would have been our parents' anniversary. Hannah's voice sounded strained, lacking its usual confidence. "Samantha, I know it's been a while, but I was hoping we could discuss some financial matters. Nothing major, just call me back when you can." I deleted it without responding. 2 more followed in subsequent weeks, each more desperate than the last. I maintained my silence, protected by distance and the quiet life I'd rebuilt. The direct confrontation came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was helping a student with reading difficulties when the school secretary appeared at my classroom door. "There's someone waiting to see you in the front office," she said quietly. "She says she's your sister." Hannah sat stiffly in the waiting area, a shadow of her former polished self. Her designer outfit had been replaced by department store basics, her manicure grown out, her hair lacking its usual professional styling. When she saw me, she stood quickly, smoothing her skirt with nervous hands. "Thank you for seeing me," she said formally, as if we were business acquaintances rather than sisters who had once shared everything. We walked silently to a nearby coffee shop, the awkwardness between us a physical presence. Once seated with untouched drinks before us, Hannah cleared her throat. "I'm sure you've heard about my situation," she began. When I didn't respond, she continued. "Wesley made some poor decisions. He's working to resolve them from abroad, but in the meantime, things have been challenging. Not once did she acknowledge her role in our estrangement or express remorse for her actions during the inheritance dispute. Instead, she framed her visit as a temporary setback in an otherwise successful life trajectory. "I was hoping you might consider a short-term loan," she finally said, eyes fixed on her coffee cup. "Just until Wesley's legal issues are clarified." "And how much would this short-term loan be?" I asked, my first words since greeting her. Hannah named a figure that nearly matched my entire settlement amount. "I still have excellent credit," she added quickly. "I could make it a formal arrangement with interest." The conversation felt surreal, sitting across from my only sister as she essentially asked for the inheritance she had taken from me, now lost through her own poor choices. I maintained careful boundaries, neither agreeing to her request nor rejecting her outright. "I'll need to consider this carefully," I said, gathering my belongings. Financial decisions shouldn't be made impulsively. The irony of echoing the advice she had once rejected wasn't lost on either of us. 2 days later, the final bombshell dropped. A financial news outlet published an exposé detailing Hannah and Wesley's fraudulent investment scheme. The article revealed that much of the money from my parents' estate had been used not for legitimate investments, but to pay earlier investors and fund their lavish lifestyle. Hannah now faced potential legal consequences herself, the investigation having uncovered her signatures on numerous questionable documents. When Hannah called again, her composure had completely crumbled. Through tears, she revealed that Wesley had left her with nothing, transferring their remaining liquid assets to accounts she couldn't access before disappearing. Most devastating was her confession that she had never really understood the legal documents Wesley had prepared for her signature. "I just signed what he put in front of me," she sobbed. "I trusted him. He said it was all standard language for asset protection." The sister who had prided herself on business acumen and financial sophistication had signed power of attorney documents giving Wesley complete control over her affairs. In her greed for my share of the inheritance, she had handed everything to a man who valued wealth above all else, including her. The final irony came when Hannah admitted that during the inheritance dispute, she had never actually read the full legal complaints her attorney filed. "Wesley handled all that," she said, her voice small. "He said it was just standard procedure to ensure I got what I deserved." What she deserved. The phrase echoed Wesley's words to me months earlier, a cruel symmetry in how his manipulation had come full circle. Hannah's legal settlement was finalized 6 months after Wesley's disappearance. She avoided jail time by cooperating with authorities, but the financial penalties and community service requirements were substantial. With her assets frozen and reputation in tatters, she faced a humbling reality check that no amount of designer clothing could disguise. After considerable reflection and consultation with Dr. Winters, I made a decision that surprised many who knew our history. I offered to help Hannah with basic living expenses, not the extravagant lifestyle she had become accustomed to, but enough to maintain a modest apartment and essentials while she rebuilt her life. "Why would you help her after everything?" James asked as we discussed my decision over dinner. The question was valid, and my answer surprised even me. "Because it's what our parents would have done," I replied. "Their money destroyed our relationship, but maybe it doesn't have to define our future." My help came with conditions. Hannah would need to work legitimate employment and demonstrate financial responsibility. Through Martin's connections, I arranged for her to take an administrative position at my school, a humbling step down from her previous corporate status, but steady employment with health benefits. Hannah's transformation wasn't immediate or without setbacks. The first time she saw her tiny office in the school's administrative wing, I caught a flash of the old Hannah, her nose wrinkling slightly at the fluorescent lighting and dated furniture. But necessity proved a powerful motivator, and gradually, Hannah adapted to her new circumstances. Working in education connected her to our mother's legacy in unexpected ways. As weeks turned into months, I watched my sister rediscover values that had been buried beneath years of materialistic pursuit. She volunteered for the school's book fair, remembering how our mother had done the same. She began bringing home made lunches instead of ordering expensive takeout. Small changes accumulated into a larger shift in perspective. Our parents had raised us with clear values that Hannah had rejected in favor of Wesley's vision of success. Now, stripped of the trappings of wealth, she began reconnecting with the person she had been before money became her measuring stick. 6 months into her job at the school, Hannah approached me with an idea for a financial literacy program for high school students. If I had understood basic investment principles, I might have questioned Wesley's promises, she explained. Maybe we can help other young people avoid similar mistakes. The "we" wasn't lost on me, a tentative olive branch extended after so much conflict. With the remaining funds from my settlement, I established a small foundation supporting causes our parents had valued: education, medical research, and community arts programs. When Hannah asked if she could volunteer with the foundation's initiatives, I recognized it as another step in her personal redemption. The extended family that had been fractured by our inheritance dispute slowly reunited around these positive developments. Thanksgiving dinner at Aunt Patricia's house marked a turning point, with Hannah bringing a homemade apple pie rather than the expensive wines she once favored. As family members shared memories of our parents, I noticed Hannah listening intently, occasionally wiping away tears. After dinner, she pulled me aside to the quiet of Aunt Patricia's sunroom. "I've been trying to find the right words," she began, her voice unsteady. "But there aren't words adequate for how completely I betrayed you and our parents' memory." The apology that followed was raw and genuine, free from the calculated manipulations that had characterized our previous interactions. "I convinced myself I deserved more because I lived a bigger life," she admitted. "But I was measuring the wrong things entirely. Forgiveness didn't come easily or all at once. There were still moments when remembering her coldness during the inheritance dispute would stop me mid-conversation, a sudden chill despite our warming relationship. But watching Hannah's genuine efforts to rebuild her life with integrity created space for healing neither of us had thought possible. James proposed on my birthday, not with an extravagant diamond that would have impressed the old Hannah, but with my grandmother's restored ring that he had secretly retrieved from the estate sale. The simple gesture embodied everything I valued: thoughtfulness over flash, meaning over monetary worth. To my surprise, Hannah threw herself into helping plan a small, meaningful ceremony. "You don't have to do this," I told her as she assembled handmade centerpieces in her apartment. "I know," she replied, focusing on arranging wildflowers in mason jars. "I want to." When I asked Hannah to be my bridesmaid, the tears in her eyes spoke volumes about our journey from estrangement to reconciliation. The wedding itself was everything our parents would have loved: intimate, joyful, centered on relationships rather than appearances. Hannah stood beside me in a simple blue dress, her brief toast capturing our family's journey without directly referencing the painful past. "Our parents taught us that true wealth lies in how we treat each other," she said, raising her glass. Samantha never forgot that lesson, even when I did. I'm learning it again through her example. The most profound moment of healing came 6 months after the wedding. Hannah suggested we visit our parents' graves together on the anniversary of the accident. Standing before the shared headstone, Hannah placed fresh flowers beside the marker. "Do you think they would forgive me?" she asked quietly. "They already did," I replied. "They forgave us before we even made our mistakes." That's what parents do. We stood in silence, two sisters who had traveled a painful road to arrive at a truth our parents had lived: that relationships outlast possessions, that character matters more than wealth, and that forgiveness, while difficult, offers the only path forward from betrayal. The inheritance that had nearly destroyed us ultimately revealed who we truly were. For Hannah, it exposed a vulnerability to materialism that had nearly cost her everything. For me, it tested my commitment to the values our parents had instilled. In losing the money, I had preserved something far more valuable. In gaining it all, Hannah had lost herself before finding her way back. As I watch my sister rebuild her life with newfound wisdom, I often think about what our parents' true legacy was. Not the $12 million that appeared and disappeared so dramatically, but the example they set through decades of quiet integrity. They lived according to their values rather than their bank account, finding joy in purpose and relationships rather than possessions. In the end, that was the inheritance that mattered, the one that sustained me through betrayal and eventually helped reclaim my sister from the hollow pursuit of wealth at any cost. If you've made it to the end of this story, I'd love to know if you've ever experienced a family conflict over money or possessions and how you navigated those challenging waters. Leave a comment below sharing your experience or any insights this story brought up for you. And if you found value in this journey through loss, betrayal, and redemption, please consider subscribing and sharing with others who might be facing similar family challenges. Remember that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the integrity and love we bring to our relationships. Thank you for listening to my story.